But she's an amazing person. It's been amazing to watch her walk with the Lord, and we're just excited to hear her story. So would you guys welcome Emily Chavez to the stage, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily. For you guys who don't know me, I've been going to the story for a little over 3 years now, which is funny because I'm always in the back and I think I know about 1% of the church's population. But in God's funny timing, he presented this in front of me to say, suck it up and say hello to absolutely everyone. So, hello. Hi. When I was first asked about how I felt about sharing my story, my first two thoughts were, no, thank you. Just not on my radar. And then my second one was, how does my life even compare to the life-changing and miracle-bending stories I hear on the stage every week? To be honest, I'm horrible with public speaking, and a big part of me doesn't want to do this right now, but you never get anywhere in your faith without getting out of your comfort zone. In more ways than one, I feel like God in his timing wanted me to share about my struggles with anxiety and mental health while having faith. I've always felt almost ashamed of having those struggles, and always felt like I wasn't a good enough Christian because of them. But I know I'm not the only one who deals with this, and I feel like it's so easy to feel like you are when you want to compare your walk with others' outwardly walk as well. And I feel like even if my story can resonate with one person in this room, I feel like it's really good to know as a Christian who struggles with mental health and anxiety that you're not alone and that it's okay to not have it all figured out. We're all just trying to figure it out. Like I said, my name is Emily. I'm 23 and I'm the youngest daughter of 3. I was born into a Christian home, both my mother and father being devout Christians since the 90s, I'm assuming. Knowing about Jesus and going to church was something we did every week. For the first 14 years of my life, our home church was in Grants Pass, where I live, called New Hope Bible Church. Honestly, that church was amazing in hindsight, but of course, as a young kid, the last thing I want to do is wake up early and sing old hymns on a Sunday. But I still went. Looking back now, I really miss those small things like singing hymns and having potlucks and things I wish just as a kid I could just skip. Unfortunately, in 2016, our pastor unexpectedly passed away in his sleep. He was a very, very close friend, and that doesn't even do it justice. He was kind, loving, and had a heart for welcoming anyone and everyone to the family of Jesus. Okay, tears are hard to make it see. His death not only rocked my family's, but also the life of that church as well. For the next year, people tried to fill his spot and become a lead pastor, but ultimately the church decided to close down about a year later. And his death was the first close death I've ever encountered in my life, and I remember wondering why someone so passionate about sharing the love of Jesus and spreading the word would be taken away from the earth so quickly. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't shift my perspective on my walk with Jesus as well. I already did that, okay. I remember after leaving that church, it was the first time I ever encountered some kind of confusion in my faith. I knew Jesus and I knew I believed in him, but when a main source of knowledge of Christ is stripped away, you're just left with a lot of thoughts. And I was never baptized at that church because I always felt like, I have one more year. I don't feel ready yet. And then when that opportunity got stripped away, I just was left there sitting, just wondering what to do now. This confusion could also be because around that time in my life was also the same time I really acknowledged my battle with anxiety. I always knew I had some nervousness as a kid and that my mind thought about things a little bit differently than others, but never the staying up way too late, uneasy, thinking too much, wondering about Christ, life after death, and the second coming of Christ, and wondering if my relationship with Christ is real and true, or if the devil's just trying to convince me that I'm not a true child of Christ. Some of you may know the thoughts, it's exhausting. And I never wished it on anyone. Anyway, as a teen, I just remember being so jealous of others who visually looked on fire with the Lord. And I remember longing for that type of flame. At this point, I was a sophomore or junior in high school, and my family decided to go to Edgewater in Grants Pass. I loved this at the time because my friends at school went there, and it was a really popular church, and I really find my closest relationship in worship and in singing. So I loved going there. At this time, COVID was big, and I feel like, going back. But through the years of going to Edgewater, I had moments of highs and lows with my connection with the Lord. And I feel like these peaks and valleys really became evident after graduating high school in 2019. I I went to a private Christian school, and after I'd graduated, I felt like, okay, it's finally time for me to take a step out in my faith personally and not having someone guide me through it. And I still wondered why, though, as a Christian, I still battled with such heavy anxiety. Through the years of 2019 to 2020, I had my first experiences with panic attacks on all scales. Some I could talk myself down from, and some I was truly convinced I was going to die that night, which terrified me even further. At that time, COVID was big, and I just had to take a step away from church in Edgewater. And the next year, I really didn't go to church or dive into the Word at all. Some online services here and there, but nothing like I once had. I think a big reason why that period of my life had such big panic attacks is because Satan knew that I wasn't getting the Word, and I didn't have that foundation that I needed, and he kept attacking me, and I kept getting knocked down. Those years, because of the circumstances, were probably the hardest years of my life, spiritually and mentally. Eventually, I got to a point where I really wanted to go back to church, and my fiance's best friend, Brian Pennell, his best friend's dad, Brian Pennell, was an elder here, and so we tried out the story. And I can't speak for Zach, but I personally was like, it's really cute in here. There's a lot of younger people, and like on a first level basis, I really enjoyed what the story had to offer. And I quickly came to really enjoy the story. It just felt comfortable after and welcoming after not attending church for so long. And I finally felt, after a long time, me actually wanting to listen to a sermon, which sounds horrible, but sometimes they feel repetitive, and I just felt myself zoning out. Zav Rousseau and all the elders who take turns preaching genuinely had me interested in learning the gospel again. All this to say, I started to notice, hey, I'm actively interested in learning about Christ again. In no way do I feel perfect or cured for my anxiety or mental health, but I do feel the Spirit of Christ working with me and consistently reminding me of Jesus and his promises. I actually had a really anxious period of my life recently, and I just felt so heavy every day. And every day I felt myself crying out to God to help me, like I had done a million times before. And I was driving home late one night, and I was talking with God in my head, in my car, and I just knew what the night had for me. A lot of more anxious thoughts, a lot of battles, a lot more staying up way too late, uneasy. And I knew that Christ remains the same, and I knew that he's faithful to his people, and I kept reminding myself of that as I was talking with him, and I found this verse, Romans 8:38-39. For I am sure that nothing can separate us from God's love, neither death nor life, neither angels or demons, neither our fears for today or our worries about tomorrow, not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. And as I was talking with him on my way home, I remember him saying surrender in the back of my head. And I'd never had one of those God moments where I actively felt like it was him talking to me. So I tried to shrug it off because I was like, maybe it's just my brain thinking something. And I had put on the song Oceans by Hillsong because it's a classic whenever I feel really sad. And then after that song, remind you I hadn't said anything or cued anything, the song I Surrender by Hillsong comes on. And I remember just feeling like so exposed. Totally one of those God moments I hear about. And I felt every single one of those lyrics in the deepest part of my soul. Like God knew that's exactly what I wanted to say, but I couldn't say it. And I turned the volume all the way up, put my windows all the way down, and cried instantly, and really felt completely covered in the Holy Spirit. God bless Zach, because I called him immediately after, hysterically sobbing. Because I just had to tell someone about the moment God and I just had. And I went home and actually prayed over my bed that night because I feel like that's where I've had my deepest battles. And I can say ever since then, my sleep has been better, my nights have been calmer, and I feel like I'm resting more in the promises of Jesus. So I highly recommend praying over anything in your home. And on the conversation of surrendering, God has really put it on my heart to finally surrender all of me to him. My parents don't know this, but I really wanted to make sure that they're here, but I'm getting baptized today. So that's super exciting. I'm blessed that Brian's wife, Jessie, is going to do that for me because she's been such a leader in my faith. And I just want to finish by saying, calm myself down. Whew. For anyone who struggles with anxiety as a Christian, through moments of darkness or restless nights or in thoughts, through times it just feels so utterly alone. God's never left. He's never abandoned you. He longs for you. He hurts with you. And as Psalm 5 says, weeping may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning. Thank you for listening.
Well, today we are moving into the second phase of our summer series. Our summer series is called Life with God. Our leadership team is praying about what God wants to do in this church family and really feel like God is just inviting all of us into deeper, abundant life with the person of Jesus. And so last month, for the month of June, we looked at life with God through the Word, how the Word of God reveals to us the heart of God and the plans of God. And we're moving today into the second phase again, which is exploring life and prayer. So the entire month of July, we're going to be looking at life and prayer. And again, want to invite you guys out Sunday evenings. We're going to be doing prayer and worship starting tonight from 6 to 7:30 downstairs. You're more than welcome to join us for that. But if you were to ask Christians, the majority of them, hey, what would you say is the most important aspect of the Christian life? The vast majority of Christians would no doubt answer, it's prayer. One of the most key, fundamental, foundational parts of the Christian faith. But what's interesting is if you were to ask that exact same group of Christians what aspect of the Christian faith they struggle to engage in the most, the vast majority would also answer the same way and say prayer. So prayer is the thing we know we ought to do the most, but find ourselves doing the least. At least that's me. Maybe I'm just alone in that boat, but it's for some reason, we know that this is key. We know this is important, but have struggled to actually find rhythm and routine and delighting in it. And for me, that was kind of a part of my life and my journey with prayer. Was this reality of myself finding I want to do this more. I want more of Jesus. I want to pour my heart out. I want to hear from him, but finding it more of like something I had to do, like more of a duty rather than I actually like am delighting in God's presence in prayer. And maybe that's just part of kind of the church culture I grew up in. I'm not really sure, but I think for all of us, we can maybe relate. But what I've discovered is that the key really for the going deeper in prayer, and really the reason why we don't pray. I think prayerlessness is really rooted in two different things, but they're interconnected. The first one, the reason we don't pray as much as we should, I think number one is we don't know our true identity as children who have been adopted into the family of God. We don't know who we are in Christ. And then the second reason I think we don't pray is a lack of intimacy that we feel with the Father. These are two key big highlights for why we don't pray as much as we should, or even as much as we desire at times. And what's interesting though is there's this paradox. We don't pray because we don't really know the privilege and access we have as kids who can come into God's presence. And we don't pray because we feel like there's a lack of intimacy with God. But the thing is, those are the two things that we grow in the most when we enter into prayer. When we do enter into prayer, we grow in intimacy with the Father, and we grow in our identity as children of God who have been adopted into God's family. But again, the reason we find it difficult, I think, to pray, to just converse with God, to dialogue with God, is really we fail to understand that He is our Father. Jesus said, when you pray like this, our Father. Prayerlessness is rooted in really fatherlessness, that we don't really know God as the Father. And just as for most people, unless you're like a hyper extrovert, most people don't just go up to strangers like in public and like start conversations all the time, right? For most of us, we feel secure talking with people that we know and people that know us. And so again, I think this exposes the reason a lot of us don't pray, whether we know this or not, is it reveals that maybe we're not as close to God as we thought that we were. Why don't I talk to God? Why don't I share my heart with God? Why don't I pray as much as I ought to? And maybe it's because we don't know him as well as we thought that we do. There's maybe this lack of intimacy. But the good news is this, and here's what I found to be so amazing. This passage in Matthew 7 has kind of been one of my life verses when it comes to prayer. The good news is this: prayer begins with God wherever you're at. It doesn't matter whether you feel like you're super close or whether you feel distant or you're somewhere in between. Prayer, which again is just dialogue with God. It's just relationship and dialogue. It begins wherever you're at with God. And so this is what we see in Matthew chapter 7. If you want to look down, starting in verse 7, here's what Jesus really invites us into. It says this. It says, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, it will be opened. So 2 things I want to point out in this passage regarding prayer. Notice first, there are 3 different, what's called present imperatives, 3 different commands to usher us into a life of prayer. He says, ask, seek, and knock. And each one of these is essentially saying the exact same thing. It's saying Jesus is inviting us to come and pray. But why does he have to use 3 different words? Why not just say, hey, pray and God will hear you? Why does he say ask and it'll be given, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened? Well, the reason that Jesus uses 3 different words to explain the exact same thing is because each one requires a different amount of effort and faith on our part, which means it reveals that God understands that some people feel like they are close to God and some people feel distant and some people feel somewhere in between, but no matter how you feel, God is still inviting us into a life of prayer. You see, when we feel close to God, the starting point is just ask. If God is close, and he always is, but sometimes we don't feel that. When you do feel close to God, though, the starting point is, hey, I can just ask. My prayer life is, God, I'm just gonna come and ask. I know where you are, you're right here, you're close, I feel connected with you. I'm just gonna come and ask. That's what my boys do every single day for Dino Nuggets. They're just like, hey, I'm hungry. They know Dad's right there in the living room, and they're like, yo, give me those Dino Nugs. And I'm like, hey, if you ask for Dino Nuggets, I'm not giving you the serpent or the scorpion. Dino Nuggets it is. So boom, they just appear. It's magic, right? It's cool. But some people in relationship with God, some people don't feel like God's close and they can't just ask. And so Jesus acknowledges that. And what's the second thing he says? He says, seek and you will find. What does seek mean? Seek implies maybe you feel like you've walked away from your faith, or maybe you feel like God's distant. Maybe you don't know where God is. And Jesus acknowledges some of you will feel like that at some seasons in your relationship with him. You don't feel so close like you can just ask. And so he's inviting you to seek, which is a life of prayer as well, seeking God in prayer. And so God says, for those of you who are here today and you're like, man, I feel like there's distance between me and God, seek him and you will find. And then the third level, an even deeper layer, which requires more faith, is he says, knock and it will be open to you. Sometimes you're like, man, I want to talk with God. I want to pray, but I just feel like he's so distant. And I'm seeking, and as I'm seeking, I'm realizing there's some barriers. I feel like there's some things between me and God, not barriers that God's put up, but maybe it's things in your life. Maybe it's barriers you've created. And God says, if there's barriers, if there's doors, and you're wanting to pursue me, he says, knock and that door will be opened. So what I love about this, again, it's all an invitation to prayer, but what Jesus acknowledges is that we all experience God's presence at different degrees through different seasons of life. He says there's gonna be times when you feel close to God, so just come and ask. There's gonna be times when you feel distant from God, come pray and seek. There's gonna be times where you feel like there's closed doors or barriers. Jesus says, come and knock and those will be opened. So no matter how close or distant you feel to God, here's the thing. God has invited us to pursue him and to know him through this beautiful dialogue of prayer. Prayer is not just for people who feel close to God. Prayer is not just for the varsity Christians. It's for every single child of God at every season of our life. And so I want to just, before going on any further, I want to just ask you and invite you to really just search your heart this morning, because in this room, everybody's in a different place. And as we're pressing into a month of prayer, it's important to take inventory and just be real with God and say, where are you at today? And so that's what I want to ask you. Where are you at in your relationship with God this morning? Some of you might feel really distant. That's okay. God wants to meet you today. Some of you might feel like he's inaccessible or like he's behind closed doors, and God's inviting you to come and to pursue and to knock on those doors. Some of you feel close. You're in a season where you're thriving in your relationship with God, and God says, praise him. Come and seek, and you're going to continue to find. And so where your prayer life begins wherever you're at. This is what's so amazing about prayer. Again, I had this conception as a young Christian of like, oh gosh, like I don't know if I can do that yet or achieve that, or I'm not good enough or don't have the words. And that's not it at all. Prayer is wherever we're at. God meets us right there. God doesn't want fake prayers. He's not looking for the perfect you. God is looking for the person who will humbly and honestly come before him and just say, God, here's where I'm at. And so I feel like kind of distant, I'm gonna seek you. I feel like there's closed doors, I'm gonna knock. I feel close, I'm just gonna ask. My prayer and hope for you today is that as you realize wherever you're at, that you would just press into the presence of God through prayer, and you'll see that God will meet you there every single time. Amen? Amen. So the first thing we see in Matthew chapter 7 again is that God understands and acknowledges and invites us, whatever season we're in, he's still inviting us into prayer. The second thing I want you to notice though here is notice in Matthew 7, our prayers of asking, seeking, and knocking, these are actually not the starting point of prayer. This is really, really important to get. Our prayers are never the starting point, but our prayers are always a response to the invitation that has been initiated by God through his son, Christ Jesus. Prayer isn't something I manufacture and make up and just do. Again, notice God invites us into this. Jesus starts the conversation. He says, hey, I want to talk to you. I want to hear from you. So come and ask, come and seek, come and knock. Jesus is the one who starts it. And this is important because a lot of times in prayer, we think that, well, I'm the one who kind of has to initiate. I'm the one who kind of has to manufacture the words to stay and to start the dialogue. And especially if you don't feel close to God, you're never going to initiate. Like if you feel distant, you're not going to be the one to like go and pursue. And so the reality is this, we see that through this, God is the primary initiator. God is the one who is inviting us and extending to us an invitation to pray. And what this reveals is it reveals to us how intimate Christ wants to be with us. The fact that he starts the conversation here, he invites us to pray, he invites us into his presence. We already know going into this how he feels about us. He wants to do life with us. He wants a relationship with us. Some of you can remember back maybe to the first time ever that you asked somebody out on a date. Maybe leading up to it, like you had a few days, like you were up all night, you were panicked, you were freaking out. You're just like so nervous to like ask this person out on a date. It was your first crush or whatever. For me, it's like 4th grade. This girl chased me on the playground and I was like, ooh, like I was so nervous to like ask her on a date because I was just like freaked out that she would reject me. And that is exactly what, check this out. That is the fear of initiation, is the fear of rejection. But notice, flip the script. Think back, maybe some of you are here. Maybe you can think back to a time when somebody asked you out on a date. You can remember the first time somebody said, hey, I want to date you. I want to take you. You now know, being on the receiving end, you know how that person feels about you. There is no fear of rejection. You don't have to guess. They're saying, I'm into you. I want to take you out. And so this is so important to understand. What we see in prayer, notice, prayer is not the conversation we start. Prayer is not the conversation we initiate. It is a relationship into which we have been drawn. Our starting point with God in prayer isn't, I wonder if God likes me. I wonder if God loves me. I wonder if God will accept me. I wonder if I'm good enough for him. No, he initiated. He's invited us into this dialogue. So we already know how he feels about us. We already know that he loves us. We already know that we're accepted in the person of Jesus. His voice breaks the silence. His voice calls out to us saying, seek and you will find. Ask and it will be given. Knock and the door will be opened. I love what Eugene Peterson said about this. It's this book our staff is reading. It's an amazing book called Working the Angles. Here's what Eugene Peterson says about this. He says, prayer is never the first word. It is always the second word. God has the first word, and prayer is answering speech, responding to what God is already at work doing. We must develop within ourselves the means for a full and continuous awareness of its secondary quality, its answering character. Isn't that good? That's so freeing to know that in prayer, that I'm not getting the first word in with God. God has already spoken the first word. And because God has spoken the first word, because God has revealed to us how he feels about us through his word and through prayer, we now come into the conversation speaking to a God who has already spoken. We say, God, you're already working in my life. You're already speaking. You're already opening doors. You're already doing something, and I get to come in and respond to what you're doing. As it says in 1 John 4:19, we love because he first loved us. Our pursuit of God is a response to the God who has pursued us. And the amazing thing is he's already showed us how close he wants to be with us. He's already covered the greatest distance. He didn't have to leave his throne in heaven. But Jesus left his throne in heaven, came down to this earth, and took the sin that separated us from him on the cross so that we could now confidently draw near through prayer to his throne of grace. So if you're here today and you're like, man, I just feel so distant from God, I want you to know there's no distance that God hasn't already covered. It's already covered. If you're here today and you feel like, man, there's just some sin in my life that's keeping me from prayer because I'm just so ashamed, there's no sin that hasn't already been dealt with. There's no shame that hasn't already been done at the foot of the cross. If you're here and you're like, man, I'm afraid, I'm fearful to pray, there's no fear that his love cannot quench. There is no insecurity that can't be undone by the perfect love that we have been invited into. And so I just want to encourage you this morning. Again, some people are in a great spot and feel close. Some people feel distant. Some people are in between. But to know that whatever it is you feel, whatever God is doing in your heart, we are coming into a life of prayer, not bringing our emptiness as the starting point, but our prayer begins with God's fullness. Our prayer is, God, you're full. You have everything you need. You're sufficient, and you've invited me into this dialogue of prayer. And so I might come empty, but God, you're the source, and you're the one who has all the fullness, and so I come to you and trust in you. And so my question for you is simply this. As we see in Matthew chapter 7, the starting point is Jesus initiating, Jesus' invitation, and us responding. My question for you is this. What is your starting point in prayer? Like to really honestly think about that. When you go before the Lord in prayer, are you initiating in hopes that God will receive you, in hopes that your prayer is going to be good enough, in hopes that he's going to be proud of you for how good you've been or what you've done? Is that your starting point, or is your starting point, you know what? I'm coming to Jesus in prayer in responding. I'm responding, believing, God, you've already accepted me. The work on the cross is finished. I'm adopted into your family. We've received our new identity as sons of God who have access to the inheritance of Christ. I'm responding in faith, believing that you have already spoken. My prayer is that you would discover the joy of this, because again, prayer isn't me trying to manufacture and conjure up something just to create dialogue. It comes out of the awareness that we've already been pursued, that we're already loved, and we're responding to what God has initiated. So my prayer for you is that in your prayer life, you would just grow in the awareness of this. You'd grow in the awareness of just responding to what God is already doing in your life. Amen? Amen. In this prayer series that we're in for this next month, the month of July, we really wanted to just include kind of some personal experiences with prayer. I'm not sure how many of you were here last week. Rousseau gave a teaching on scripture memorization, and it was so powerful because for Roos, that really has been a foundational aspect of his walk with Christ. He got up and was like, I feel like this is the most underprepared I've ever been, but his whole life was like the preparation, and it felt just so real and raw. Not sure if you guys were here for that, but it was amazing. And so in this prayer series, we wanted to share with you guys out of not just theory and theology, but real practical life experiences and ways that we have been able to cultivate deeper prayer lives. And this is by no means anything I'm perfect in or anybody's perfect in who comes up here and shares, but we did want to just give you just some really basic starting points to help you guys lay a deeper foundation of prayer in your life. So for me, kind of part of my journey with prayer was, I grew up in the church. I grew up in a Christian household, but I didn't really ever have a personal prayer life apart from, saying prayers at the dinner table or kind of bedtime prayers or when I went to church on Sunday morning. That was really what prayer was for me. I didn't know that prayer was I could actually kind of have a conversation with God like I do with any person at any point in the day. Well, that kind of began to shift and change when I moved to Maui. For completely wrong motives. I went to a Bible college to surf because the condos were on the beach. And so God really got me out there by drawing my heart through surfing. But then over time, what happened is my heart kind of began to change. It was a mandatory, you would have times in the Word and prayer every single morning. It was called like student devotions. There were student devotions on South Beach right there in Kihei every single morning at 8 a.m. before classes began. And I was like, whoa, like that wasn't something I'd ever really done before. Spending time in the Word and in prayer every single morning. And what happened, again, it was mandatory. So it's like I had to go so that I wouldn't get kicked out of Bible college. But what happened over time, that's really where my prayer life, my personal prayer life began to grow and began to be cultivated. And what was happening is that I was seeing that the things I was praying for, that God was actually responding and answering and moving. And more than anything, prayer was changing me. Prayer wasn't like, God, here's all the things I want, give me what I want. Through prayer, God was changing my heart and changing my life. If you would have been my roommate in first semester of Bible college, I kid you not, I could not say a single sentence without a swear word thrown in there. Like I went to Bible college and I had the filthiest mouth ever. And all my teachers and my roommates, they're like, dude, like you're not supposed to cuss in Bible college. And like you're a Christian. I was like, I know, dude, but I don't know how to stop. Like I just don't know how. And through prayer, like that was one of the first things. I was like, wow, I just said like a whole paragraph without the F word. That was amazing. That is the power of prayer right there. Like it was actually changing my life. And that's just one small example. But really what happened is, for me, it started with devotions on the beach and times of prayer on the beach that I had to go to. But then in my life personally, just seeing what God was doing in my life and how I was actually changing, my heart was changing, it moved from this is something I have to do to, man, this is something I really look forward to doing, to going and being on the beach and spending time with God in prayer. And so it was that moment for me, which was really foundational, that I began to cultivate more of a rhythm of a life of prayer. And again, not something I'm perfect in, something I'm still cultivating. But on a practical level, this is something that I found to be really helpful, essential things for helping me try to stay consistent. If you're here and you're like, man, I find myself in this boat, Zav. I know I should pray more. I want to pray more, but I just don't, and I don't really know why, and I want to give you just two practical things. This is not going to be anything new. It's just two practical things that I've tried to implement in my life and that we see modeled in the life of Jesus and in the Gospels that has helped me and that hopefully will be helpful for you to cultivate a deeper, consistent life of prayer. The two things would be this, and again, very basic. The first thing is this: time. You need a time to pray, and number two, a place. That you need a place that's set apart for prayer, time and place. And so we see this first and foremost in the life of Jesus. Mark chapter 1, verse 35, if you want to look down there. Look what it says here. Again, this isn't just what I tried to do. This is what Jesus did. It says in Mark 1:35, and rising very early time in the morning while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. Notice Jesus had a specific time. He rose early in the morning and a specific place. He went out to the deserted place and there he prayed. What's interesting is that this is not just the only place that Jesus regularly prayed. If you look at Matthew 14, verse 23, Matthew 14:23 says, and he dismissed the crowds and he went up by himself on the mountain place. When evening came, he was there and alone. Time. So what you see in the life of Jesus is so cool. Jesus gets up early in the morning and he goes out into the wilderness and prays. It's a busy day of ministry, and Jesus in the evening gets up and goes up to the mountain and prays. So what we see, number one, when it comes to time, Jesus had specific moments of time throughout his day in which he got away from the chaos and the busyness of life to pray, to dialogue with the Father, to pour out his heart, to listen to what the Father was already doing, to respond to what the Father had initiated. It began with time. And Jesus, very often, it was the morning, but he also prayed in the evening. You see Jesus praying throughout the whole day as well. But there were specific chunks that Jesus set apart for praying. And in the early church, you see this as well. In fact, in Acts chapter 3, verse 1, it says this. It says, now Peter and John were going up to the temple at the hour of prayer, that is the 9th hour. So in the early church and in Judaism, it's interesting, they had a lot more structure around prayer than we do. We're like very loose. I'm like very loose, but we see here they were going up at the 9th hour. What is that? Well, in the early church, there was 3 times of prayer. There was early morning prayer in connection with the early sacrifice. There was prayer at the 9th hour. That was at 3 p.m., so it was afternoon prayer, and that was to lead the way into the evening sacrifice. And then there was prayer at sundown. Every single day, 3 times a day, the people of God would come to the temple if they lived there in Jerusalem to pray. And even today, there are set times of prayer in Judaism where they go and they face Jerusalem and they pray. So again, they got this. Jesus got this. The apostles got this, that if we're going to be people of prayer, it takes first and foremost setting aside a specific time to do so. Because if you don't have a specific time to pray, here's what I found. You will very rarely find yourself casually fitting it into your day. Like you might start off with good intentions. I do a lot of times. Oh, I want to pray. I want to get better at that. But I don't have any structure or any time set apart. And it's like you can go the whole day and realize I wanted to do that, but I ended up not doing it because from the time your day begins, here's what happens. The moment your day begins, there is a constant stream of distractions and of other people who need your time. Have you found this to be true? Nobody wakes up and is like, oh my gosh, I have the whole day and nobody wants my attention or time and I can literally just like pray all day. Nope, that's nobody's life. Even Jesus, where we saw, remember in Mark chapter 1, verse 35, Jesus got up early and he went to pray. Here's why he did that. Look at the following two verses, Mark 1, 36 and 37. Check this out. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him, for they found him and said, everyone is looking for you. This is Jesus' life. This is your life. This is real life. Jesus gets up early in the morning to pray. And by the way, just a side note, nothing like revelatory and crazy here, but I was reading this week. I don't know how I never thought of this. I was like, how did Jesus get up before the sun to pray without an iPhone or alarm clock? Like legitimately. I was like, dude, that's like hardcore. Like if I don't got an alarm, it's like I'm out, bro, right? But Jesus got up before the morning, before the sun even rose to go and pray. But the craziest part about it is Simon said, everyone's already awake as well and they're looking for you, Jesus. And Jesus knew that was gonna happen. That's why he was like, I'm out, y'all. Like I can't do it. I need some time in prayer, right? So here's the thing. From the moment, same with the life of Jesus. I mean, you're not as desirable as Jesus, but it's pretty. From the moment you wake up, people are asking for your time. People are asking for your attention. Jesus is already up praying. Everyone's looking for him. Everyone needs something for him. And this is the reality. When you wake up on a new day, your inbox is already full. When you wake up on a new day, your social media feed is already refreshed with an infinite vortex of people who want your attention. When you wake up in the morning, your kids already need you. When you wake up in the morning, your phone is already full of notifications. When you wake up in the morning, you are operating in a deficit. Can I get an amen? Like you wake up and you're like, I got the whole day, but you're like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? Like this is the time and the culture that we live in. And here's the thing, you can never meet everyone's expectations for you. When you wake up, your phone has expectations for you. The news has expectations that you'll be caught up on it. Your inbox has expectations. Your family has expectations. Everybody wants your time. Everybody needs something from you, and you can never meet them. And this is the reason why you need time with God in prayer. Because what's most important is not, well, what does everybody else want from me and expect of me? But what's most important is, what does God want from me? What does God expect from me? Have you ever really just like thought that simple question? God, what do you want from me today? What do you expect from me today? How can I please you today? How can I fulfill the plans that you have invited me into? You see, we need time with God in prayer because that is like our need for God is greater than the needs that everybody else has for us. And we oftentimes just get it backwards where we think like, I'll just give God the leftovers kind of at the end of the day. And then it never ends up happening because you didn't even get through everything you thought you would by the end of the day. So here's the thing. The reason we need time in prayer is one simple thing. It's because you're not God and because I'm not God. That's why I need to pray. And that's why you need to pray, because you're not God. What I mean by that is simply this. You can't ever be what everybody needs you to be. You can't ever do what everybody wants you to do. You can never, ever in a single moment, in a single day, meet all the needs and give to everybody everything that they want. But here's the thing, God can, and God can do that for you. Everything you need is not going to be met in everybody else and their expectations. It's going to be met in the person of Jesus. And that's where prayer begins. Prayer responds to understanding, God, you've already initiated this relationship. I'm coming to you so that I can hear from you. I'm setting aside this time that I might meet with you so that I can know, God, what do you have for me today? Prayer gives clarity. Prayer gives vision. Prayer gives purpose to our day and our lives. And so I just want to simply encourage you, don't let the busyness of your life and of your work and your family and your ministry, don't let that choke out and crowd out what's most important, which is your personal relationship with the person of Jesus. Jesus is speaking. Jesus is calling. Jesus is initiating. Jesus is pursuing. Are we responding? Are we giving him the time of day? Are we listening? Are we engaging? Are we praying? Are we entering into this divine dialogue? And so my prayer for you, my prayer for our church, my prayer for myself is simply this, that we would just find time. And again, this is something you have to be intentional about. It's not gonna happen on its own. To set aside, number one, a time each day where you say, I'm giving this chunk of time to prayer. I'm blocking it out. I'm blocking out this time for prayer. And then paired with that, number two, I close with this. The time, Jesus rose early in the morning, Jesus rose in the evening, whatever it is. The second thing we need is not just a time, but a place. The place. I need a time to pray and I need a place to pray. And we see this again in the life of Jesus. His preferred place was what was called the solitary place or the desolate place. Again, Mark 1:35, rising very early in the morning while it was still dark, he departed and went to a desolate place and there he prayed. Matthew chapter 14, verse 13, we see it says, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Luke chapter 5, verse 15 and 16 says, now, when even more the report of him went abroad and great crowds gathered to hear him to be healed of their infirmities, but he would withdraw to desolate places to pray. So over and over what you see with Jesus is this. Number one, he had specific times that were set apart for prayer. But partnered with that, number two, is that Jesus realized it was necessary to have a place that is separated from all the people and everybody who wants things from me, to actually physically distance himself from all the distractions and all the needs, to go to a desolate or solitary place so that there he might pray to the Father. And so for you, I want to encourage you not only to prayerfully ask God, when do you want me to pray? Like I want this, but I realize I need to just set something apart for you. But not only the when, but also the where. What is that place where you feel distractions are eliminated or at least minimized as much as possible? The space, the physical space, it could be a few things. It could be a room in your house. But maybe the rooms in your house, maybe you live in a small house, maybe you have a bunch of kids, maybe you have sucky roommates, and you're like, it ain't gonna be the house. Okay, that's fine. If it ain't the house, that's cool. Hey, maybe it's the car. I've found in this season of my life, commuting, like driving in a car, just like turn off the podcast, turn off the radio, do a prayer drive. That has been so refreshing personally for my soul. I'm praying in a car. Maybe it's a room in the house, maybe it's the car, maybe it's the office. Maybe it's you need to go on a walk through the park. Maybe it's a coffee shop. Again, for every person, it might look different. You have to find the place that is going to be for you the least filled with distractions. So if there's a good place in your house, say, you know what? I want to consecrate this room. I want to consecrate this couch. I want to consecrate my porch or whatever, and have that be the place where I go and meet with Jesus. Or God, I want to consecrate this place in my office or this coffee shop, and I'm going to go and I'm going to set aside a time every single day to go and meet with you in this place. So it could be, number one, a physical space, but also it could be a mental space. It could be a place that you've created in your mind that you say, God, I'm going, like I might be sitting in my living room, I'm sitting in the church, I'm sitting in a coffee shop, but in your mind, you allow yourself to go to this place where Jesus meets with you and where Jesus hears you. Maybe for you, this place is the streams of quiet waters, the green pastures. Maybe it's a mental image God has given you, and that's the place where you go in your mind to go and meet with him. So again, it could be physical spaces, or it could be spaces that God's even given us in our imagination. God is big enough to meet us in our imagination, and he can give you a place where you can go and where you can meet with him. But here's the thing, again, with all of this, there's no sort of legalism in this. This is not like, oh, like if you don't do this for this amount of time or whatever, like then you're not a good enough Christian. No, all of this, again, it's understanding Jesus initiated, he's inviting us into this. And here's what you have to understand if you're here and you're saying, I want this, I want to cultivate a deeper life of prayer. It's important to understand that the time and the place is going to be different for every person, and it might change at different seasons of life. And that's totally okay. For me, my life with prayer began in the mornings on the beach, which again, that was pretty easy. Like when you have a beach in Maui to pray on, it's like, oh, no brainer, that's easy. Well, I moved from mornings on the beach in Maui to my grandma's trailer park in West Medford. I moved back from Maui and I was like, this ain't the beach on Maui. But again, the place changed and the time changed. I used to get up super early for this job that I had. I had a radio program. And so my prayer wasn't early in the morning when I was doing early morning radio. It was in the trailer park in the afternoon after the morning morning radio. So again, time placed, change placed. Then I got kids now, right? I got my own house now, but I got kids. So waking up in the morning on my couch like that, it very rarely works. And so what I found now, my time, my place, it varies. When I go on my runs, I don't listen to music. For me, running time is prayer time. I'm like, this is an amazing way to just kind of get my mind off of all the stress and the things going on, to go pray and run and have a conversation with God and listen to God. I found that to be so refreshing. So again, you don't need to be so rigid and go, it has to be in the morning, it has to be. Like, here's the thing. When the Bible says that they gave God their first fruits, I've heard preachers say this, we got to give God the first fruits. So you need to make sure that you get up first thing in the morning and you have to give him that. Well, what I found is for some people, the morning, which people call first fruits, might be your worst fruits, right? Straight up. Like if you get up at 4 in the morning to try to go on your knees and pray to God, it ain't gonna happen. Like it ain't gonna go good. For some of you, maybe it will. Praise God. The first fruits is not, I'm literally giving you the first 10%, because again, even first fruits, nobody's giving God 2.4 hours out of their, so we can't be so literal. First fruits is, God, I wanna give you my best. So when it comes to giving God our best, again, maybe you are your best in the morning. If it is, then I would say, then do that. Set some time aside in the morning. Maybe you're at your best in the afternoon. Maybe you're a night owl. You're at your best in the middle of the night or late night. That's great. For every person, it's gonna be different. But what I wanna simply encourage you in is this: when are you at your best? What is your first fruits? And to say, you know what, God, I'm gonna set aside this specific time, and here's the place. There's a place, maybe it's my house, the coffee shop, the park, I'm running in the car, whatever it might be. I'm gonna choose a time and a place, and I just wanna begin to cultivate a life of prayer, a life of consistency. And again, you can try and wing it, and you can try and just pray kind of as the day goes. And for most people, you'll find that you're not really gonna be consistent in that. It's gonna be very hard. Most of us need a little bit of structure. I typically don't like structure, but for prayer, if I don't have structure, it's really not gonna go anywhere. And so I found this to be super helpful, and we see it modeled in the life of Jesus. And I just believe that life with God is rooted in a life of prayer. If you want this, if at the beginning of the summer you said, man, this is a summer for me of consecration, setting aside this summer to go deeper in my relationship with Jesus, prayer is so foundational, and you're never gonna tap into it by accident. It's gonna take some intentionality. It might feel like a little bit of work at first, but the delight will come. And so I simply wanna just, as we're about to close out, I simply wanna just invite you, even this week, maybe today before you go to bed, that your first time of prayer would be this: God, what is the time that you want me to set a place to meet with you? And what is the place where you want to meet with me? To literally just take 10 minutes before the Lord, even today, before the end of the day, and ask him those questions. God, I want to give you my first fruits. I want to give you my best. And what is that time and what is that place? And for each person, it's going to be different. And at different seasons of life, it may change, and that's okay. But if you will today just spend a little bit of time with God in prayer and invite him to reveal to you, God, when can I meet with you and where do you want to meet with me? Again, you won't have to manufacture it. Trust me, he already wants that for you. He already wants to meet with you. He already wants that deeper level of intimacy, and he will reveal it to you. And so my challenge for this week, as we're pressing into a month of prayer, is specifically that: to pick a specific time and place. And as God reveals to you when that time is and where that place is, I would say this: just start with, try 15 minutes a day. If you're here and you're like a prayer warrior and you want to do way more than that, that's awesome too. If you're like new at this though and just wanting to begin to get your footing, I would say just challenge yourself for 15 minutes a day. God, here's the time I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it at 1 p.m. or I'm going to do it at 5 a.m. or I'm going to do it at 10 p.m., whatever. Here's the time I'm giving to you, and I'm just going to go to that place and I'm going to meet with you. And if you will do that, you will begin to see this week. You'll begin to see God not only showing up in those little 15 minutes where you met him in that time and place, but he will begin to show up in every single area of your life. You'll begin to see him moving and working and doing things that you never could have seen before. And so I just want to simply invite you and encourage you, as Jesus was a man of prayer, he invites us into that same relationship that he had with the Father. And that's my prayer and our prayer for this church family, is that we would be a people who meets Jesus, that we'd be a people of prayer, and that we'd be a people who sets aside that time and place every single day for Jesus to come and speak with us. Amen.